First of all, Michael, what inspired you to tell this story?
I've had a deep love of Christmas for a long time, and a deep love of horror movies. And it just seemed like two great things that could go together. But there's been a long history of Christmas horror movies, and I would even say A Christmas Carol is probably the first one. You know, it's essentially a very scary ghost story. So that was a huge jumping off point.
Can you talk a little bit about the design of the various antagonists? I mean, sometimes when horror movies show the creature, finally, it's a bit disappointing, but here everyone is terrifying. They all work really well, they're all practical. So what sort of went into that when you were coming up with these things?
A lot of time sketching and designing the creatures. I come from an animation and illustration background, so before I started writing and directing, I was just doodling, and sort of carried that into this process. So if I ever get writer's block, I'll turn to the sketchbook and draw things out until I can really clear the writer's block, and then gave those designs to What a Workshop, and they started building these amazing puppets, which I also love.
Have you taken any of them home?
Not yet, but I really want to. I'd love it if Krampus lived in my living room.
Was it a challenge to sort of balance the festive nature of the film and the humor with then the sort of the intense horror that comes in later?
Yeah, it's tricky, but once you figure it out, you can tell. I mean, if you veer too far into the comedy, then it gets cheesy pretty quickly. I prefer mostly horror with dashes of comedy. The films that I was inspired by, like that's how they would play it. Is that the actors are playing it straight, and the comedy just comes in appropriate doses here and there to kind of give your audience a break. They let their guard down too, so.
The setup, you know, is great for the film. You've got these great actors all together in a room exchanging barbs and sort of trading lines and everything. Was it always the intention to set it up as a family comedy and then sort of turn it into sort of the horror film? And has it created any challenges for marketing, having that sort of that the way it is? Yeah,
there was always the intent going in. I've always wanted to do a sort of a genre switch movie, you know, where it's a romantic comedy until the halfway point, and then aliens invade or something. So it was fun sort of looking at the tradition of Christmas movies, which tend to be about families getting together around the holidays and working through their personal issues as they try to deal with the holiday encroaching on them. But we wanted to manifest those fears and anxieties as actual monsters and creatures, so adding Krampus to the mix seemed like the perfect solution to that. But every time I watch a movie, I can't help but think, like, well, how would I turn this into a horror film?
Obviously, work is proceeding on Trick or Treat 2. Do you think Krampus could get a sequel?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm just taking it day by day. I mean, anything is possible. There are some rough ideas, but nothing concrete at the moment. I have to go back to Halloween first.
What would you say is your favorite Christmas movie, apart from Krampus?
A Christmas Story.
Really?
Yeah, I loved that one growing up. When I grew up in I think it was 83 or 84. Again, that same era. And as a kid, that was the first contemporary Christmas classic that had come along. Up until then, it was a lot of movies from the 40s and 50s. But A Christmas Carol was the first modern Christmas classic until Gremlins showed up, and Die Hard after that.
So, final question, and it is an X-Men Apocalypse question, which you only wrote the story for. What do you think that movie will bring to the wider X-Men world?
I think it opens up the X-Men universe a bit, because it expands and deepens the history of mutants and their struggle, because you find out that mutants existed a lot longer than we think. In the film universe, it's widely believed that mutants only showed up in the 40s into the 60s, but Apocalypse rewrites the history, and you find out, well, they go back to prehistoric times, biblical times, and that's where we get our stories of gods and other sort of supernatural deities. So I think it'll be an eye-opener.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!